We try to comb the country, not just with the Big 12 and what they're doing, because we do that every day, but also throughout the country. David Teel has been someone who's joined us before from the Richmond Times-Dispatch, and he joins us on Sick on 365 Radio and 365 Sports. David, great stuff. The column, the article you did, threefold challenge for imperiled ACC in wake of latest conference realignment. How would you describe the mood right now among most of the leaders or others around the ACC?
I think uncertainty, perhaps a little anxiety, just the great unknowns, and hoping that the conference can stick together.
David, what is, I guess, kind of the feel in terms of just thoughts about whether they're going to be proactive, reactive? How do you kind of see that? Is everybody just sort of standing around kind of looking at everybody, almost a standstill at the moment?
No, I think they want to be proactive. The question is, can they be proactive? Because any move that a conference makes these days is rooted in television revenue. And can bringing a USC and a UCLA to the Big Ten obviously drives the revenue train. Bringing Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC drives revenue. Can the ACC, other than somehow getting Notre Dame to join, spoiler alert, that's most likely not going to happen. Is there anything else the ACC can do to bridge the revenue gap that it has with the SEC and the Big Ten? And I think they're exploring those avenues, but whether they come up with an answer is unclear.
Have you had anyone say, hey, we're good, we're going to make it?
I don't know quite in those terms, but I think among some leaders in the conference, there is a realism that, and rightfully so, by the way, that the ACC is never going to be on par with the SEC and Big Ten when it comes to money. And maybe even will be miles behind. But for years now, the ACC has continued to compete at the highest levels in both football and men's basketball and also Olympic sports. The Big Ten has missed the college football playoff more often than the ACC has. And the ACC has won 2 national championships in the playoff era. So it's not as if the league is lagging behind competitively. Can the football be better? 100% yes. But overall, the league remains competitive at the highest levels across the board.
David, in the last 16 national championships, and I know that now we're in this playoff mode, but since Texas won it in 2005 with the great Vince Young and the great win against USC, the SEC's won 12 of 16, but you just said something, and I had written this down. The ACC with Florida State and Clemson is next, because Ohio State in the Big Ten is the only team from the Big Ten during that time that's won it. So they have kind of held their own a little bit. I kind of see that maybe that gets overlooked.
I think it does to some extent. And if you look at the 13 programs that have won national football championships in the last 25 years, once the current realignment is done, once USC, Texas, and Oklahoma find their new homes, 10 of those 13 champions will reside in the SEC and the Big Ten. The 3 exceptions compete in the ACC. That would be Florida State, Clemson, and Miami.
David, we've heard and read a lot, as I'm sure you have also dug into it as well, about the grant of rights. We know that it's forever, till 2036 or whatever, and there's thoughts that can people get out of it or whatever. 2 questions. One, It's a lot more difficult, is it not, to even think you can do that? We've even seen Texas and Oklahoma delayed by it. And then number two, if in fact the ACC was to attempt to get larger and they wanted to expand, does that dissolve the current grant of rights?
First of all, your point is quite well taken on OU and Texas. If grants of rights were easy to escape, Longhorns and Sooners would be out the door before 2025. But to date, we haven't seen that. Would expansion automatically dissolve the ACC's grant of rights? My understanding is the answer is no. The only requirement is that the incoming members would have to sign on to that grant of rights, the existing grant of rights. It would not be voided.
Which of the teams do you feel like, if in fact they were to have a problem and to stick together, which I don't know why ESPN would want the ACC to fall apart, because hell, they own it, and they got a great deal with it. Which of the teams are more matched, in your opinion, because I've seen some, with the SEC than maybe others in the conference in the ACC?
Depends on what the SEC wants. If the SEC wants just football brands, then obviously you go to Clemson, Florida State, Miami. If the SEC wants new markets, then you're looking at a North Carolina or an NC State, maybe in combination, or you're looking at Virginia Tech. And neither Big Ten nor the SEC has a school in Virginia or North Carolina. I think those markets would be attractive. But guys, with the SEC and the Big Ten pushing $100 million annual distributions to their schools eventually, we have to ask ourselves the question, are any current ACC schools worth $100 million a year to those conferences? Because that's how much revenue they'd have to generate to keep everyone's piece of the pie whole.
Yeah.
And to me, that seems unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
David, what do you think when you hear about the Pac-12 trying to swing some type of loose alliance with the ACC?
I'd like to know more.
Right. Yeah.
What exactly would it look like? What kind of scheduling arrangements would that entail? And again, I hate to keep harping on it, but it's what all of this comes down to. Would it bump TV package?
Yeah.
David, Jim Phillips is the ACC commissioner. He obviously at times has been under some heat and scrutiny, but he's a guy that's very well respected from what I can tell around the country and obviously within his own conference. How has he reacted to some of this?
We don't know.
Oh, he hasn't said anything, huh?
He has not said a word publicly. I know he has had multiple gatherings of his athletic directors and his presidents. And I had an athletic director tell me the other day that he gives Phillips high marks for how he's comported himself since USC and UCLA announced their intentions to leave for the Big Ten. But best of my knowledge, he has not commented publicly, and surely he will be asked about it a week from Wednesday when he gives his annual State of the Union at the ACC's football kickoff in Charlotte.
Yeah, the Big 12 has theirs. David, we have ours this week covering the Big 12 on Wednesday and Thursday. So some of these things are about to at least open up some mouths, right?
Welcome to the Big 12, Brett Yormark, right?
Yeah. Hey, Brett, congratulations. The very next day, yet another part of the earthquake in college football's landscape, or college athletics landscape for that matter.
Absolutely.
How do schools, in your opinion, David, look at those from the Big 12?
Schools in the ACC?
Yeah, I'm sorry. How do schools in the ACC look at schools in the Big 12?
Oh, I think there's a lot of respect there. I mean, heck, Virginia Tech and West Virginia certainly have a history, and they're going to play on a Thursday night this season in Blacksburg. And last year's game at Mountaineer Field was, essentially a last play game. Terrific entertainment. Those schools go back to pre-Big East even. So there's respect among, they don't interact often and play one another often, but that's just one example. West Virginia Pitt in the backyard brawl. There's another rivalry that's going to be renewed this season.
What do you think if, in fact, one of these two things would happen first? The ACC somehow gets Notre Dame involved, which, of course, most people think because of what they're doing with other sports, but not football, that will never happen in football, or that the ACC is poached?
I think there's probably a greater chance down the road, once we get nearer to the end of this television contract that you referenced earlier that expires in 2035, 36. Then could you see the ACC be poached? Yes. I don't see Notre Dame. There's only two things, guys, that in my mind would drive Notre Dame away from football independence. One, access to the college football playoff. Two, the ability to schedule nationally. If conferences suddenly started playing 10-game league schedules, I'm not saying they're going to, but if they did, how much would that compromise Notre Dame's ability to craft its schedules? And would that, in fact, push the Irish toward conference affiliation?
David, thanks for your time as always. We appreciate it very much.
Thanks, guys.
David, again, Teel, Richmond Times-Dispatch with us on Sikkim 365 Radio and 365 Sports.
Yeah, his article is really good. It's interesting. It's